In this video, we'll be doing two examples on evaluating the quadratic formula, which is shown here. So for the first example, we're going to evaluate the quadratic formula where my value of a is 3, b is -5, and c is -2. Notice in the quadratic formula the symbol that's red plus or minus. This actually means there's two solutions, the first of which we'll call x sub 1, which is found by using the plus case in the plus or minus, for which you add these two terms. And then to get the second solution, you do the same exact thing, except you subtract these two terms. So a shortened version of these two formulas would be to just write plus and minus. So let's plug these three values of a, b, and c into the formulas. So I have the first solution, x sub 1, would be found by taking the opposite of b, and in my case, b is -5. So I'll write the opposite of b, and my b is -5, plus the square root. Now I have to square b. This is where you have to be careful because my b value is negative. To do this correctly, you put parentheses around the value of b. Off to the side, I should note that by putting parentheses, the negative gets squared as well as the 5, meaning that this notation means -5 times -5, which is the correct way to do the problem. It is common for students to write the problem without the parentheses, and although they may do it by hand correctly, this is the incorrect way of writing the answer because this notation means to square just the 5 and then take the opposite of the answer, meaning that only the 5 gets squared, which would be 25, and then you take the negative. So notice the first answer of -5 times -5 would have given us the correct answer of 25, and if you write it without parentheses, you get the wrong answer of -25. So please just get in the habit of putting parentheses around b when you use the quadratic formula. So now I'm at the part of the formula where I subtract 4ac. You can use dots for multiplication, or you can just put a and c in parentheses like this. A is 3, and c is -2. Here I'll close off the radical now that I'm done with everything inside of it. Also, don't forget that all of this is being divided by 2 times a, where the a value in my problem is 3. Now I just need to simplify what I've written. So for example, changing the sign on b, I would get +5. -5 squared, as I said previously, would be +25, since the negative is supposed to be squared. Here I have an even number of negatives being multiplied together. That gives me a plus. 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 times 2 is 24. In my denominator, we have 2 times 3, which is 6. On the next step, I'll just point out that 25 plus 24 is 49. Now I have 5 plus, the square root of 49 comes out as 7. So for my first solution, I get 7 plus 5 is 12, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. So one of the answers is 2. Now to do the exact same thing, except this time we use the subtract case in the plus or minus instead of the plus case. So here is my answer for x sub 1. And I'm just going to make 2 alterations. Since this is my second solution, I will label this x sub 2. And where I had a plus for addition in my first solution, I'm going to change that to subtraction. So how would that have made things change? So in my second step, everything would have came out the same, except I would have a subtract here instead of a plus, and I need to change this to x sub 2. On the next step, we would have gotten 5 subtract the square root of 49 all over 6 instead of addition. And finally, this would have came out 5 subtract 7 over 6. So you can see everything played out exactly the same, except my final answer here used to have addition, now it has subtraction. But the final answer is completely different because 5 subtract 7 is -2, which simplifies to be -1/3. So here's my second solution. Now let me show you how to check these answers on a graphing calculator. I'm going to do that in 2 different ways. I'm going to press the mode key in my calculator, and in my calculator I have 2 choices. I can put my calculator in classic mode, by moving over to Classic and pressing Enter, or I could do the problem in Mathprint mode. I'll show both ways. Now that my calculator is in Classic mode, let me press Second, and then the second feature of the mode key is Quit. To put this in the calculator in Classic mode, notice that everything in this numerator is going to be divided by 2 times 3. So I'm going to need huge parentheses around all of this stuff in my numerator. So I'm going to start with a left parenthesis. Then I'm going to type in negative, left parenthesis, -5, right parenthesis, just like I had written down by hand. Doing the plus case, press plus. The square root key is the second feature of the x squared key, so I press second, x squared to get a square root. Notice it gives me a left parenthesis here. We're actually going to need parentheses to tell the calculator that everything under my radical starts here and ends here. So this purple parenthesis that I just put in by hand is actually the first left parenthesis given by the calculator. So my point is I need another set of parentheses around the -5. So I'm going to press left parenthesis, -5, close that parenthesis off. So I'm saying take -5 and square it. Hit the subtract key, 4. You can either use the multiplication key or just put the 3 in parentheses. I'll put the -2 in parentheses. Now, since I'm done writing everything that's under the square root, I have to write another right parentheses, which I've written in purple by hand here. That's this one. With this many parentheses on the screen, it's very difficult to keep track what is going on. So it turns out this left parenthesis here was the beginning of everything under my radical, and this right parenthesis was the end of everything in the radical. But I've still yet to define what's in my numerator. So I still need another right parenthesis for this one right here that I've drawn by hand. So right parenthesis. It's helpful sometimes to count how many left and how many right parentheses you have. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left parentheses. So I better have 6 right parentheses. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a lot of parentheses, and just because I have the same number of left parentheses as I do right parentheses still does not mean that I've typed it incorrectly. You have to check to make sure that they make sense. Now I'm going to divide. Just like we did in the numerator, I need to tell the calculator that both the 2 and the 3 are in my denominator, so I'll have an extra set of parentheses here as well. So I'm going to have left parentheses, 2. You can either multiply by 3, eliminating the need for these parentheses here and here, or you can just put the 3 in parentheses, and don't forget to put this right parenthesis to end your denominator. Now I press Enter to see that I get the answer of 2, like I did by hand. The nice thing about this is you can either press the up arrow and then press Enter to copy everything you just did. If you're on an older calculator, that won't work. Let me clear this and show you on an older calculator, you'd have to press the second button and then the Enter button here to get the previous answer shown on your screen. I'm going to press the up arrow and change the addition to subtraction to get our other answer. By now you may have forgotten that our second answer was -1/3. The calculator will give us the decimal equivalent of -1/3. So notice when I press Enter now, I get -0.3333 repeating. If you didn't know that -0.3 repeating is the equivalent of -1/3, you could press the math key on your calculator, which is right here. Press Enter twice. The first Enter says you want the previous answer written as a fraction. The second Enter is what actually gives you the answer of -1/3. So now let me show you how much easier it is to use the Mathprint feature of your calculator if you have one. Let me clear the screen. I'm going to press Mode. This time I'm going to go up and press Enter to select Mathprint Mode. Get back to the home screen by either pressing Clear, like I just did, or Second Mode would have worked as well. Now because what I want to type in is a fraction, if you were to press the alpha key on your calculator and then y equals, you'll be accessing the first function menu of your calculator. I want to press enter to select the first option, which is numerator over denominator. This puts something on the screen that allows me to type in the numerator and the denominator without having to put parentheses. This will eliminate the need of putting those parentheses all around my numerator and all around my denominator, as I did in the last way I typed in the calculator. So I'm going to type in negative, parentheses, -5, plus, and the square root can be found by hitting second and then the x squared key. You still have to put the -5 in parentheses. Press the squared key. Subtract. Make sure you use the subtract key instead of the negative key. And then we had 4 being multiplied by 3. And I'm indicating multiplication by just using parentheses. And then that was being multiplied by -2. Now notice to get in the denominator, all I have to do is press the down arrow. And my denominator was 2 times 3, which I'm just going to write as 2 parentheses 3, and then close the parentheses. This is a much easier view to compare what's on my screen to what is written by hand. I'm going to press enter, and we get that same answer of x equals 2. Like before, I can press second, enter, to get that copied again, and I can just press the left arrow and the up arrow keys to navigate to where we had addition and change that to subtraction. This is the subtract key in the calculator. Now that I've changed the addition to subtraction, I get my other answer by pressing enter. And in Mathprint mode, it automatically writes it in fraction notation. Let's try another example. This example is very similar, except we're given different values for the a, the b, and the c. So for my first solution, since b is 7 in this case, I have the opposite of 7. We're doing the plus case. Then I have the square root of b squared. Our b is 7. Because our b is positive, you really don't need the parentheses, but I'm going to put them just to get in the habit of putting parentheses around the b before I square it. Then we subtract 4 times a times c, and in my case a was 2 and c is -4. Then don't forget all of this is being divided by 2 times a, and for this problem a is 2. So simplifying this down, I get that 7 squared is 7 times 7, or 49. We have an even number of negatives being multiplied, so that's plus. 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 4 is 32. My denominator, 2 times 2, can be written as 4. Simplifying further, 49 plus 32 is 81. And the square root of 81 is 9. So for my first answer, I get 9 and -7 make 2. And 2/4 can be reduced as a half. The directions said to give both an exact answer and a decimal. So as an exact answer, I get a half, or as a decimal, that would be 0.5. Now I'm going to repeat and do the exact same thing, except change the addition to subtraction. So here's all my previous work, and I will change x sub 1 to x sub 2 and indicate that we're doing subtraction now instead of addition. This would have all came out the same, 49 plus 32 over 4, except we'd be subtracting. And this is our second solution. (49) and 32 still add together to be 81, except this time we'd be subtracting. The square root of 81 is 9. And finally, once again, I change the addition to subtraction. Except this time, you get that -7 subtract 9 is -16. And it's being divided by 4. And then that simplifies down to be -4, and there's no need to represent that as a decimal since it came out perfect. So as a second solution, I get that x of 2 is equal to -4. And we should go in the calculator and check this. So since I'm in Mathprint mode from the last example, I'll start there. I'll press alpha, and then the y equals. To access the first function, f1 in my calculator, press enter to select numerator over denominator. And our answer was -7 plus the square root was second x squared key. I'm going to put parentheses around the 7 just to get in the habit of doing so. We squared that. Make sure to hit the subtract key, not the negative key. We're supposed to subtract 4 times a times c, and I like to type a and c in parentheses. A was 2, c was -4. Press the down arrow key to get in the denominator, and my denominator was 2 times 2. Press enter to get the first answer of 1/2. If you want, 1/2 can be written as a decimal of 0.5. Now I'm going to retype exactly what I had before, except change the addition to subtraction. Since I did two things here, you'll have to press the up arrow more times to get up there to copy this. Or if you're on an older calculator, you have to press second enter twice. Once to get this previous answer written on the screen, and then a second time, second enter, to go back and actually copy the answer to our problem. If you want to see a fast way to go from the right side of the problem to the left without pressing the left key many times, you can press second and then left. It'll pop you all the way to the beginning, and then I only have to press the right arrow a couple times, and I can change the addition to subtraction by using the subtract key, press enter, and get the other answer of -4. Finally, I'll show this again, but in classic mode. So I'm going to press the mode key, up arrow, right arrow to classic, press enter to change the calculator to classic mode, press clear to get to the home screen. The disadvantage of classic mode is that you have to have a lot of parentheses in the right place. The advantage of using classic mode is to get good at knowing where to put parentheses appropriately, especially because a lot of apps or software do not have the equivalent of the Mathprint mode in a TI-84 calculator. So remember, in classic mode, we need to make sure the calculator knows that all of this is in my numerator and all of this is in my denominator. What's more, we have to clearly indicate what's under the radical. Since the calculator does not extend the radical in classic mode as it does in Mathprint mode, you need to put a left parenthesis here where you begin the square root and a right parenthesis here where you end the square root. Many of these parentheses would go away if you use the multiplication key in your calculator rather than putting numbers in parentheses. So let me press a left parenthesis for this red one I have here. -7 plus square root is second x squared key. Then notice when I hit the square root key, the calculator already gives me a left parenthesis for free. That would line up with this red parenthesis here. The calculator wants you to define everything that's going to be underneath the radical. I thought it was a good habit to put b in parentheses before squaring it. So I'm going to go left parenthesis, type my b value of 7 in, right parenthesis, squared. Then we have subtract 4 times a, which was 2, times c, which is -4. Now I'm going to need 2 more right parentheses. One to tell the calculator that I've ended what's in the radical. Now I need another right parenthesis to tell it that everything that's written on the screen right now is my numerator. I press the division key. Now I'm going to type in left parenthesis to start to tell the calculator everything that's in my denominator, which is 2, and then another 2 in parentheses. And then I'm going to type in this final right parenthesis to indicate that I'm done writing my denominator. If you want to count parentheses, you should notice that we have as many left parentheses as right parentheses. Pressing enter, I get the first answer of 0.5 or 1/2. Now to do the subtract case, I'll press second enter to recopy everything that's on the screen. Rather than pressing the left arrow many times, I'm going to press second negative to get to the beginning of what I wrote. I'll press the right arrow a few times and change the addition to subtraction by using the subtract key. Press enter to get the other answer of -4. So now I have both solutions to my second example in classic mode. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I wish you the best of luck.